Welcome to the channel, Limitless VR and Sim Rigs. If you're new, like and subscribe, share these videos with all your crazy friends. But if you've already subscribed, thank you so much. Your support means the world, and it really is helping me continue to bring this content to everyone. Now, recently I've done a series of videos. They're on the channel, so you can jump in there and check them out. But they're benchmarking the 4090 versus the 5090 in VR. Now, the results were pretty profound in some cases, average in others, but one of the things that kept coming up in the comments was people asking me, how am I super sampling the Quest 3 with virtual desktop past 100%? Now, the way I'm doing that is I'm using the OpenXR Toolkit. But then that drove more questions where people were asking, well, what's the OpenXR Toolkit? And I mentioned also about using Opencomposite. And again, people were wondering what that was. It dawned on me that there's a lot of people out there still that do not know about what these tools are, how to use them, or maybe they have heard about them, but they're just not confident with how to implement. Now, what they are in essence are tools that allow us to either change the runtime, being SteamVR, and use OpenXR instead, and the companion app to Opencomposite is the OpenXR Toolkit. So once we're in OpenXR, this toolkit is an overlay that can come up in screen and you can switch between the various tabs and settings and features. Now, some of those features are fixed foveated rendering. How cool, right? For those of you that don't know, fixed foveated rendering is the ability to render the outer periphery of the edge of what you see in a lower resolution. And by doing that, we can get more frames per second out of the graphics card because it's not putting as much load on the graphics card. And for the most part, we don't really see in that outer periphery. Now, it's a shame with virtual reality headsets because if you actually have fixed foveated rendering with eye tracking, well, that's where it really shines because that outer ring that's rendered less is always moving depending on where your eyes go. So we don't have that, but we can turn on fixed foveated rendering and tune it using the OpenXR Toolkit. So you can adjust how wide or how narrow you want that rendering to be. Plus, there's different levels. So you can have the outer ring at a different level, the inner ring or the middle ring at a slightly higher resolution, and the ring that's closest to where you're going to see with your pupils will be at a higher resolution again, or the highest resolution being native. You can get a massive frame bump by just using fixed foveated rendering. Plus, we're also using the OpenXR runtime. So all of these things add up to you getting a massive uplift. There's also sharpening within this toolkit, but if you're using virtual desktop, there's probably no need to use the sharpening in the OpenXR toolkit because virtual desktop has its own sharpening slider and it works incredible. Plus, you have the ability to super sample from this. Now, yes, you can super sample using SteamVR, but if you're using the OpenXR runtime, we're not using SteamVR, well, see where we're going here. So really all you've got are the options of either virtual desktop's native settings, and the highest setting in virtual desktop is godlike. That setting is going to be at 100%, and for the Quest 3, that native resolution comes in at around 3000 by 3200 pixels per eye. Now, by super sampling, which is what some people commented on, at 122%, I was super sampling the resolution up to 3700 by 3700 pixels per eye. Now, for certain games, because I'm getting that frame uplift by switching to OpenXR using Opencomposite, I've then got enough headroom so that I can super sample the Quest 3 higher and really get a sharper image. See where I'm starting to go here? So we layer these tools on top. We use the Opencomposite runtime to switch from SteamVR to OpenXR. These things all add up to us getting, in some cases, a 20 frames per second uplift. You can then use those frames and render the headset higher to get more fidelity, turn the sliders up in game. You've got lots of options. Now, something else that we need to also touch on is the developer of the OpenXR Toolkit was copping a lot of heat. A lot of people were flaming him on the forums and stuff, which is a real shame, and he was getting a fair bit of abuse, he says. And so because of that, he has stopped support. Now, he actually doesn't recommend to use it on his GitHub, but I don't want to say disregard that, no disrespect to the developer, but disregard that because in essence you're going to get a massive uplift. But what he's meaning is because it's no longer supported, it doesn't work in certain games. Stalker 2 VR mod, if you have got the OpenXR Toolkit enabled, it will crash the game. So they're the sorts of examples where unfortunately you're just going to have to test it and see, but lots of games do support it, like No Man's Sky, like Microsoft Flight Simulator, like DCS. The list goes on. Project Cars 2, Automobilista, there's so many games that will support the OpenXR toolkit. It's not funny. Games even like Skyrim. So yeah, it's pretty cool. There's lots of tweaks you can do, lots of adjustments. So it's worth trying it. And if it crashes your game, or if your games are crashing, just remember to switch this off. Now, some other really cool software that's worth talking about, that is Say Intentions AI. Now, we're talking about flight simulation, and Say Intentions AI is artificial intelligence, ATC, in-game. And let's face it, these bolt-ons and these bits of software, they're making the difference for us in VR. The developers of these games aren't doing it, so we need companies like this to bring us this additional content that we can bolt on. I never fly in Flight Simulator 2020 or 2024 without Say Intentions AI. They've got features and settings you can turn on so that it'll hold your hand and help train you, in effect, to become a better virtual reality pilot. And then when you've got the confidence, you can actually turn those trainer wheels off and get the full ATC experience. I'm actually going to do a follow-up video very soon showing you the differences between not having those trainer wheels on, flying like, I guess, a real pilot, and actually having those settings on so that it'll hold your hand, give you a transcript of what you've said or what ATC have said to you. They've even got the ability to inject missions into the game, so you can go out and do a firefighting mission or rescue ops, a bit like NeoFly used to be, except it's all happening with the AI ATC communicating with you as well. So really cool. I'll put links in the description to it. I never fly without it. Works for FS 2020, 2024, and the X-Plane series. It is amazing. But let's get back on topic of the Opencomposite and getting this extra frame bump. Honestly, this is like buying a new graphics card. So considering that the RTX 5000 series graphics cards are almost non-existent, and if you can get one, the prices have just gone through the roof, this might be just the video that people are looking for so that you can use your existing graphics card, but my gosh, almost get these free frames and this massive uplift. Here we are, the Opencomposite software. So if you've clicked on the link in the description, this is where you should be for the GitLab for Opencomposite. Scroll down on this page. There's some information here you can read through. You can join the Discord, and there's a game compatibility spreadsheet. Not sure how current that is, but let's jump in and have a quick look at it while we're here. So there's a fair few games. No Man's Sky, okay, yeah, broken. That's true. I mean, for the most part, I can get No Man's Sky working, but what are we reading here? OpenXR crashes, requirement, works almost perfectly. The only problem is that the controls do not work in terms of grabbing and so on. Otherwise, rendering is all right. So yeah, No Man's Sky for me is working, but I do struggle to get up the overlay sometimes in the headset, but being able to play the game using the Opencomposite switcher is working. But a whole heap of games there. You can have a look through all of those, but we'll scroll down on that page and you'll see here system-wide installation. This is what I'm personally using, although there is also a per game installation. The per game installation is basically putting the appropriate DLL, of which you've got a 32-bit or a 64-bit, into the relevant folder for your game. So there's information here on doing all of that. You can read that at your leisure. I prefer the Opencomposite launcher, so we'll click on that to start the download. That'll download into a downloads folder. We'll open that up and open Sesame. There we go. All we need to do is open up the zip, and this root folder here is where we will copy to a location that you're going to remember. So let's copy that. I'm going to paste it into Documents. Then if we open that up, we can actually see the launcher is here. There's actually nothing to install with Opencomposite. So you could right click that and you could either send it to your desktop as a little shortcut, or you could pin it to the taskbar. Now I've already got it pinned down to the taskbar, so my option there is to unpin it, but your option, if you haven't, would be to pin the taskbar. Then we will jump across to the OpenXR Toolkit. Now, if we jump back up to the top, you can see that there's a whole heap of text here in red. Have a read through it, but it's basically the developer who is letting us know that the OpenXR ecosystem on PC is in bad health, and it looks like Meta is trying to squish it. So have a read through that. I'm not sure exactly what we can do so that we can make a difference, but I guess share this with as many people as you can, and we'll try and get the message out there that we don't want Meta to do that. Now, if we keep scrolling down on the page, we'll get to the downloads. The current version is 1.3.2. It's what I'm running, and it is the last version as it's no longer supported. There is a list of headsets and other things here, but this isn't up to date because the guy has stopped support. So we'll click on download the latest, and this is an executable that we need to install. So once that's down, open up the OpenXR Toolkit and just follow the bouncing ball to install that. Once done, you should have an icon on your desktop, and once you open both of those up, OpenXR Toolkit and Opencomposite runtime switcher, this is what you should see. Now, for the first time, you might need to do an update, and there's a little update radio button for the Opencomposite runtime switcher. Click that, it'll kick things off. I've never had to go into this configure option here, but if you do jump in, you can see it's got some games there. If you click on that drop down, you're just selecting which and what. So if we now click switch to Opencomposite, you'll see its now status is Opencomposite in brackets OpenXR. So that's all we've got to do from that stage to get SteamVR ready for the games to be in OpenXR. Now we'll move over to the OpenXR Toolkit. You can very easily disable or enable with that tick box. The right eye, this is for screenshots, but in headset menu visibility, this one's important because if you're running a Pimax Crystal, both eyes will cause it to not work properly and you might not be able to see it. So for me, I find switching from a Pimax Crystal or to my Quest 3, right eye only is what works perfectly for me. And to move the menu around and open the in-headset menu, I'll show you what that menu looks like. We basically hit the F2, but the modifier is control. So you've got to hold control first, then hit F2, and what you'll get up in the headset is this here. You'll see this in your headset. Got to be in the game first though, and some game menus won't load it, so you need to really get into the game before you fire this up. And some of these settings, it'll tell you when you make a change, you need to restart VR for it to kick off. So you don't have to restart the game. Good example is Microsoft Flight Simulator, because you can do the control tab to activate OpenXR and pull you into the VR world. You don't need to end the game. You can make your changes, save them. Alt-tab switches you out of VR. Alt-tab again switches you back in, and those changes will have taken effect. It'll make more sense once you play around and have a go with it. So control is your modifier. So we hit control, we press F2, and then we get this overlay in the headset. And we can already see, we can choose to have an overlay on top of the overlay where it'll show you your frames per second. The reason that's important is we're no longer using SteamVR, so you can't use the SteamVR overlay to see any of those stats in the headset. You've got upscaling options. So you can use the NVIDIA upscaler, you can use FSR, you can use CAS. I don't use any of this anymore because if you're running virtual desktop, the sharpening in virtual desktop is awesome. So it's just so much easier to use that. But you might find if you've got a different headset, certain games, you can have a play around with that. Fixed foveated rendering, this is the secret sauce here to get some extra frames. You can either choose a preset or you can have it on custom, and you can adjust the inner ring size, the outer ring size, the resolution of all of that, and you can tweak that to your heart's content so you can get it to the point where you can barely see it or see it at all, but you're actually getting a frame increase by rendering those outer areas at a lower resolution. Turbo mode experimental. Look, play around with that. You can turn that on for a slight bump, but for the most part, I run most of my games with it off. Frame rate throttling, not sure what that is, so I don't even touch that. Record statistics, pretty self-explanatory. So now with the modifier, if you press Control F3, it will move your option from the top tab across to the next tab, so on and so forth. And if you press Control and then F2, again, when you've got this overlay up, it will actually move your selector down through the menu options. Takes a little bit of getting used to, but once you fire it up, you'll get your head around it. Okay, so we'll move across to the next tab, Appearance. Pretty self-explanatory here, but if a game doesn't have the ability for you to adjust the world scale, you can do it from the OpenXR Toolkit. How cool is that? And then the next one across, I don't use anything in this tab here. I don't even know what this over prediction reduction is. If someone does, put it in the comments, but I've never touched that. But I do go into System. Now, this is the one that people were commenting on. How did I get a higher resolution in virtual desktop than 100% godlike? And this is how you do it. So in Opencomposite, well, I should say using Opencomposite to switch the game to OpenXR, or for games that already support OpenXR natively, and you can use the OpenXR Toolkit, you can then go to the display resolution per eye. You need to turn on override resolution first, and then you can adjust this to whatever resolution you want. And what you see there at 3760 by 3937 is 122% in godlike virtual desktop. So that's how you can do it. You can adjust your resolution to your heart's content. If you turn that off though, it will just set it at the native resolution. And this is also how you can tell what resolution your headset is natively without adjusting anything, because if you turn override resolution on, the minute you turn it on, it will show you what the native resolution is, as long as you haven't been messing around with the settings to start with. So if you've never messed around with this before, as soon as you turn it on, you will see what the native resolution of the headset is. Now your color grains, so that's pretty handy. If you don't have the options to do that, you can adjust these, but again, virtual desktop kind of mitigates most of that. You can also adjust the field of view. And then if we go to the menu option, you need to turn Show Expert Settings on if you want to see things like CPU usage and some other overlays in the headset. But for the most part, I don't touch any of this stuff here. This is really just for you to adjust the UI, the menu distance, the menu timeout, all of that sort of stuff. So that is the OpenXR Toolkit at a glance, how to use it, how to activate it, and the Opencomposite OpenXR switcher. Now let's open up the last bit of the puzzle. If you're using virtual desktop, you're going to want to make sure that your OpenXR runtime is set to VDXR. That's really important. I've had issues on automatic sometimes, so I like to do everything manually here. So if we're playing a SteamVR game and we want to use the Opencomposite OpenXR switcher, we switch to Opencomposite. We make sure that virtual desktop is on VDXR. If you're using the Pimax Crystal, quickly open up that software here. You can then set the Pimax Crystal to use the OpenXR runtime and not SteamVR. And then the OpenXR Toolkit will also work in those games that you're using the Pimax Crystal headset for as well. Okay, let's actually now jump into a game. We'll jump into Microsoft Flight Simulator, and I'm going to show you in real time what the overlay looks like in your headset and navigate through some of those options and changing some of those options. And let's jump in. Right, we're in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024. We're in the Red Bull MXS stunt plane, or I guess aerobatics airplane, racing plane. I thought I'd bring up the virtual desktop overlay so you can also see the changes that we're going to make will have an effect on latency and frame rate. So at the moment our latency is sitting around 55, 56, it keeps fluctuating, and frame rate is fluctuating sort of 61, 63, 62, 64. So it's fluctuating up and down around there. So let's open up the overlay now, the OpenXR Toolkit. Control F2, and we can see we've got some things here. It's telling us turbo mode prevents motion reprojection, so you're going to want to turn that off. if you are using motion reprojection. But let's now head up to, where are we? It's a bit confusing to get used to the settings. So Control F4 will take us up, Control F2 will take us down, Control F1 goes left, Control F3 goes right. Does that make sense? So we'll go up to fixed foveated rendering, and watch what happens to latency and frame rate when we do the preset. So preset on. See that? So instantly the latency dropped and the frame rate got a boost. I mean, we're kicking north there of 66 FPS. So we've just managed to get a couple of extra FPS, and we've dropped a couple of milliseconds in latency just by turning on the default fixed foveated rendering preset. So I'll turn it off and keep your eye on frame rate and latency. Whew, man, instantly latency took a hit. So we'll switch it back on. Preset. Bang. So all of these things together are what really start making a difference. Now, I'll show you what custom looks like. So we'll go Control F2 to get it back up, and we'll go across to custom. So you can tweak to your heart's content. There is so much that you can change here, and we'll actually bring it on so you can actually see it in the headset. So let's go back up, and we'll do the inner ring size. That if we go down, you should visibly see that in the headset. So we'll go, all right, there we go. You should start seeing that coming in on the headset. So that's really aggressive. I mean, we're at 40. You'd never normally use it like that. I can barely see the gauges unless I'm looking dead ahead. But that gives you an example of fixed foveated rendering in the headset and what it's doing. But I'll show you at the point where I don't really visibly see it anymore. Probably about there. So at about 77, I am just not seeing it unless I really look to the right, left, or up or down. I am just not seeing that in the headset. And so then we can even adjust the middle resolution, and we can tweak that to try and get a bump. So gosh, frame rate just almost nibbled at 66 for a second there, but 1/2 is just half resolution. So ideally you're going to want to be around sort of 1/8, and then you can work through that and really fine tune it so you're squeezing every last bit out of the headset. Okay, so we'll get back up to the top and we'll make our way through appearance. This is pretty good. World scale though is handy. And then we'll go to input. Again, I've never used the over prediction reduction. If anyone knows what that is, put it in the comments. But I do use the system. So although it's saying that I am overriding the resolution at the moment, but you'll see the render resolution's only 100, I'm actually not. I've made that change and I haven't applied it, but I'll show you what happens when I do. So get back in. And so override resolution, yes. If we turn that off, you'll see that that just disappears. But just have a look at the render resolution at the moment, because it's saying 100% render resolution, and I'm going to enable that, and it's picked up what my default is that I like to run in Microsoft Flight Simulator. So now what we'll do is quickly Control Tab to jump out of VR but then jump back in, and it should apply the render resolution correctly. So let's do that. And there we go. Whoop, spun me around the wrong way in the aircraft. Get ourselves realigned. Now you can see the render resolution is showing 122%. Now we've taken a frame hit. We're down to 55 in order to do that. But let's have a look at the frame hit if we turn the fixed foveated rendering off. So Control F2, we'll make our way down into there. We'll turn that off. And look at the latency. Gosh, latency took a hit big time. So latency's back up to sort of the 60s. We didn't get much in the way of frames, but latency, that really took a big hit. So let's turn it back on. Keep your eye on latency.
So that's significant. I mean, gosh, that's 4 milliseconds for latency, and latency is everything. If you've got a high latency, you're really going to notice that in game. So there we go. We'll turn fixed foveated rendering off. Bushgar, latency just spikes right up at sort of 62, 61. Wow, that's quite a big jump. So we'll turn it back on. And latency, significant change to latency. There's probably almost 4, 5, 6, give or take, milliseconds to be had there. So that's it. In a nutshell, that is Opencomposite. And then for games that don't support OpenXR natively, to switch them. And then also, if games do already support OpenXR, the OpenXR Toolkit to get a little bit extra out of the game and even be able to tweak some custom render resolutions.
Now let's have a look at a native SteamVR game that doesn't have OpenXR support, and we're using the Opencomposite switcher so that we can actually play it without needing SteamVR, and that's Automobilista 2. This will also work for Project Cars 2, and these are the sorts of results that you can expect to be seeing in a lot of SteamVR native games when you use the Opencomposite switcher. So the 5090, Dusk, Rain, Pimax Crystal, OpenXR, and we were running a resolution per eye of 4312 by 5102, and yeah, it's pretty massive. So 39 FPS is all we were getting with SteamVR. As soon as we enabled OpenXR, did away with SteamVR, look at that, bang. I mean, that is a huge, huge uplift. That's 22 FPS increase is just ridiculous, plus the lows. So yeah, I mean, this is just night and day. It really is that profound. And I find this across the board. Skyrim VR, you get about a 10 to 15 frames per second uplift just by switching from SteamVR to OpenXR. Now, Skyrim's got some issues where you really need to be using the mod that will put it in the game as opposed to just switching it. I always find it crashes, but explore the games that are out there. This is a starting point for you to feel confident to start using Opencomposite, and you can see from these results, it's pretty profound what you can get. But then on top of that, once you're in the game, you can then use the OpenXR Toolkit to turn on fixed foveated rendering and get even more frames out of it. So it's pretty profound what these tools are doing for VR. There we go. Not as exciting as my other videos where I'm in the sim rig or doing something stupid, but hopefully that has helped you understand Opencomposite, SteamVR, OpenXR, and the OpenXR Toolkit and what it all means. If you've got any questions or anyone is stuck, please comment, reach out. I am more than happy to help however I can so that you can yield the benefits of this uplift by getting away from SteamVR in the games that will support it. I'll see you in the next video.